Welcome to Don't Call Tech Support. In this video we're going to look at the Anthem Open Demo performance. I have tested the game using a few different configurations and the performance is, could be better. All numbers are in 1080p, so that's the only resolution I tested at, and I tested at the ultra settings. You can see where I benchmark on the screen now. I went up the stairs, went outside, made a left turn and stopped when I was at the Javelin suit. The system configurations are GTX 1070 using 3 different CPUs, i5 6600K at 4.8 GHz with 16 GB of DDR4 3200 MHz memory, an AMD Ryzen R5 1600 at 3.7 GHz with 16 GB of DDR4 3200 MHz memory, and an AMD FX8350 at 4.5 GHz with 16 GB of DDR3 1600 MHz RAM. The i5 provided the best averages, but if you look at the 1% and 0.1% loads, you'll see that the R5 1600 is slightly ahead. So for the average, the i5 6600K managed 72.2 frames per second, the 1% low was 42.6, and the 0.1% low was 30.4. And there was a noticeable stutter during the gameplay. The R5 1600 averaged 70.7 frames per second with 44.7 frames per second as a 1% low. The 0.1% low was 35.7 frames per second. The FX8350's average was quite a bit worse. That was 48.9 frames per second, so a serious CPU bottleneck there. The 1% low was 29.3 frames per second, and the 0.1% low was 24.6 frames per second. And there was noticeable stutter. Moving on to the R9 290. So, with the R9 290, I used the same 3 CPUs using the same memory, and the R5 1600 managed the best average, actually. That was a slight surprise to me. I figured the i5 would be the best average, like we saw with the 1070. But anyway, the average with the R5 1600 and the R9 290 was 49.2 frames per second. The 1% low was 36.4 frames per second, and the 0.1% low was 33.9 frames per second. The experience could be better. There was some stutter, and I switched down to the high settings and it didn't get much better, to be honest. So, moving on to the i5 6600K with the R9 290, the average was 45 frames per second, the 1% low was 34.5 frames per second, and the 0.1% low was 27.2 frames per second. So, it was slower than the R5 1600 across the board here. The FX8350 paired with the R9 290 managed an average of 43.7 frames per second with a 1% low of 27.8 frames per second and a 0.1% low of 23.9 frames per second. So it wasn't as far behind as it was with the GTX 1070. And actually the experience was pretty much as stuttery as the other CPUs, so that wasn't too bad, if I'm being honest. Moving on, we look at the low budget system, and the low budget system is a laptop with a desktop CPU and a 4GB GTX 1050. I used two different CPUs here. I obviously couldn't use any of the AMD CPUs, so it was only a Pentium G4620 at 3.7 GHz and an i5-6600K actually also at 3.7 GHz, despite what the spec sheet tells you. If we first look at the Pentium G4620 average, that managed an average of 22.05 frames per second. The 1% low was 14.2 and the 0.1% low was 11.3, so pretty much unplayable in my opinion. Moving on to the i5-6600K, that managed an average of 29.6 frames per second and 1% low of 20.4 frames per second and a 0.1% low of 16.4 frames per second. So it was a bit better than the Pentium, but the GTX 1050 just doesn't have the horsepower to run the game at ultra or even low, actually. I should also mention that the game requires quite a bit of video memory with the R9 290 and the GTX 1050, both of which has 4 GB of VRAM. The game used 3.5 GB of video memory and more. With the GTX 1070, sometimes it could go beyond 4 GB, but it didn't go much beyond that. At least not where I was testing. So it would be interesting to see how a 1063 GB would perform. Sadly, I don't have one of those cards, so I cannot perform those tests. As an end note, I can say that the AMD drivers that claim to be ready for the Anthem Open Demo didn't, well, the performance was okay. I didn't see a significant performance lift from the previous driver, the 19.1.1, but there was a quite severe blooming effect at the starting screen. For instance, the entire screen was white, and this did not happen with the 19.1.1 driver, only the 19.1.2 driver that claims to add support for the Anthem Open Demo. I had no such problems with the Nvidia drivers, and they did not claim that they were ready for the Anthem Open Demo. I'm not sure how much of a performance difference we're going to see, but I'll test that when the game releases. I think it was 22nd of February, something like that. Well, anyway, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. And remember, don't call tech support.